Go love your own enemies. Don't be loving mine. My enemies are the theocratic fascists. I don't love them. I want to destroy them.
You're a child made in the image of God. Oh no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman.
Are you a young Christian thinking about having children? Kind of exciting, isn't it? The idea of being parents, having somebody look up to you and trust you, and having that kind of influence over a young life. But do you have strong feelings against people who are gay, homosexuals? Does the idea of a child of yours being gay fill you with disgust and indignation? Ugh, the idea that your child could be gay. Would you be ashamed of such a child? Would you be mortified and embarrassed by having a child who's gay? Would you want to correct them? Try to fix them if they're gay? Would you reject them because they're gay? Do me a favor. If you're like that, don't have children. Just don't have children. You're really better off not having children. Or if you have a child who doesn't believe in your religion, is that going to be a problem for you? If your child follows their own path and makes their own decision and comes to a decision that is different than the one that you came to, is that going to be a big huge problem? I mean, what if you have a child that can't believe in God? Or what if you have a child who doesn't think that it's a bad thing to be proud of their own body, and doesn't think it's a bad thing to have sex because it feels good? They don't have the same morals that you do, or their idea of morality is different than yours, and maybe their idea of morality isn't based on a book. The book that you think is so wonderful, maybe they don't agree. So maybe they think that it's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing to want to share yourself physically with somebody else that you're attracted to. It doesn't make you a slut. It just makes you a natural, normal person. Our very closest cousin, the bonobo, is called the love monkey for a reason. That's what it does. And I'm sorry, but that's our next closest cousin. So I think for humans to enjoy sex or want sex, probably a pretty natural thing. But if it's going to make you feel disgust or embarrassment toward your own child, or if it's going to be a deal breaker for you if your child doesn't believe in the same things that you do, whether it be morality or whether or not a God exists, maybe you shouldn't have a child. I mean, if it's so important to you that your child is just a little carbon copy of yourself, believes the same things, thinks the same way, is attracted to the same kind of people. I mean, if they have to be little mini-me's for you to love them, maybe you shouldn't have children. Because, I never had kids, but this is how I feel about having a child. If I were to have a child, I would accept the child exactly as they are. I would love them for exactly who they are. I would encourage them and support them in what makes them happy and feel fulfilled. I would praise them for their strengths, and I would encourage them to not be too discouraged about their weaknesses, because we all have them. We all make mistakes. We all learn from our mistakes. Mistakes aren't something that should hang over your head your whole life unless some imaginary whatever forgives you, or you do this and this and this. Mistakes are things that teach. That's what they are. You learn from your mistakes. Sometimes the lessons are hard, but that's the way it is. You know, whatever you do, there are a few little tiny gems of wisdom in the Bible. You reap what you sow, I believe is in there somewhere, and that's a truth. You reap what you sow, and that is basically what happens when you have bad judgment and you do things that deliberately hurt somebody else. You know what? You might have some bad consequences, and you learn from them. That's all it is. You know, a loving parent would accept their child despite their mistakes. They would accept their child. Now there's a limit to that. I think if I was mom to Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer, I'd probably have a real hard time loving and accepting my child once I knew that they were monsters. But I'm talking about normal children, normal healthy children. And I'm sorry, but homosexuality is a normal thing. You know how I know? Because humans are a natural part of the natural world. We are animals, just like any other animal. We are of the natural world. That makes us a natural thing in the natural world. If humans are attracted to other humans of the same gender, that's natural for human beings. That's human beings demonstrating homosexuality. That means that it is natural for human beings to be homosexual. It's part of our makeup, just like it's part of the makeup of other animals that demonstrate homosexual behavior. And that's a lot of animals. If you Google it online, there's a lot of animals that are homosexuals or demonstrate homosexual behavior. We're just one of those animals, and there's a lot of them. We're one of many. So yeah, being natural, being part of the natural world, if human beings demonstrate homosexual behavior, that's natural for human beings. That's part of what it is to be human. Just as much as people who are born left-handed versus right-handed, or red-haired versus brown-haired. Now, a lot of fuss is online right now about this kidnap for Christ bullshit. I probably will have a lot more to say once I see the documentary. I haven't seen it. I've only just heard about what is going on, and that apparently this is something that's happening in America. These parents have no business having children. These parents are abusers. Parents that would hire kidnappers to come in, terrify their children, drag their children. I'm sorry, that's abuse. That is the worst kind of abuse there is. Parents like that should be in prison. Parents like that should have their right to have children stripped from them. Parents like that aren't parents, they're monsters. And they shouldn't have children. They're Christians. They are Christians, because part of this little thing that they're doing is they're trying to shove Jesus down the throats of their children, as well as change their sexual preference. Sorry, kid, you weren't born the way I want you to be. You weren't born my little creation, so I'm going to hammer my way. I'm going to make you suffer until you see things my way. This is abusive. This is criminal. These parents shouldn't be parents. They should be behind bars. And I'm sorry, the organizations doing this should be arrested. This is no different than child trafficking. Taking children away from their homes and making them into slaves or prostitutes or whatever. It's the same thing. This is a racket that needs to be, law enforcement needs to arrest these people and fucking put them in prison. They need to go to this other whatever it is, country, arrest these people and put them in prison. This is criminal. And people like this should not be allowed to be around children. They're abusive. They're child abusers. And parents that put their children in that kind of harm's way are child abusers of the worst kind. So yeah, I have a real strong opinion about this. I am trying to not turn this into a rant. However, I'm appealing to the Christian out there who hasn't yet put a child into this world, brought a child into this world. If you have opinion that your child is somebody you'll accept, unless, there's certain conditions that the child has to meet before you'll accept them and love them as a parent, love them and accept them completely. If there are conditions and you know it already before you even have the child, oh, I could never have a gay child. I could never have a promiscuous child, or a child who doesn't agree that, it's best to keep yourself until you're married. I could never have a child like that. I would disown a child. If my child was an atheist, I would disown them. If you're like that, you shouldn't have children. There's squirrels over there. Sorry. Distracted by the little squirrels. But yeah, you shouldn't have children. You are a potential abuser, and you shouldn't have children. Some children who grow up being abused as adults think twice before they have children themselves, because they have a lot of fear that they might turn out to be abusers themselves, because that's how they were raised. And perhaps you were raised by people who made you feel like you had to be a certain way to be accepted and loved. So now you are a potential abuser yourself. You're very likely going to bring a child into the world, and if they don't measure up to your high standard, you might end up abandoning them, or worse, hiring thugs to come and take them from their beds and imprison them and brainwash them and try to force them to be the person you want them to be rather than who they are. Oh my God, every one of us is a unique individual that has only this brief moment on the world. We should be celebrated as the unique living things that we are, the unique individuals that we are. We should be celebrated and enjoyed and appreciated and encouraged, not treated like, oh my God, I'm ashamed of you. I'm ashamed to call you my son. I'm ashamed to call you my daughter because you're not this and you're not that. Your child is who they are, and it's a wonderful thing. And you helped create that thing. And if you don't have that feeling going in, fucking A. Don't have children. Don't be one of these people that walk around ashamed of your own child. Do you know what it would be like to be a child knowing that your parents are ashamed of you? That your parents are embarrassed? That your parents want a different person? Would wish you didn't even exist and that they had a completely different person as their child? Can you imagine having parents like that and walking around feeling that way, that you don't even have acceptance from in your own home by your own family and your own parents? That's what a lot of gay people have. That's what a lot of atheist children have too, atheist kids. That's a lot of kids have that. You shouldn't have children if you're going to make your child feel that way. You should not have children. That is abuse. That's abuse. And it's wrong, and it's hurtful, and it's evil. And I'm sorry, but your cult that you follow, that makes people like this, that makes parents like this, that makes people, oh, I'll love you as long as you're not this and this and this because my book doesn't like it. It's your child. What is more important to you? Your child or what a fucking book says or what a fucking cult says? What is more important to you? Here's your chance to have a huge impact on a young life. You know, I don't remember my dad very well. He died when I was 6. But everything, I remember so much in that short amount of time. Memories, when you're with a child, you don't know. Every moment that you're with that child could be a moment they remember 30 years later. You don't know what moment in every single day they're going to pick out, and that is something they remember 30 years later. You know? Can't you make the memories be good? Can't you give your child the kind of life that ensures that 30 years later they're going to have memories of their parents loving them and accepting them and being proud of them and supportive and nurturing. Imagine 30 years later if that child is remembering their parents' embarrassment, disappointment. Oh, yeah. 30 years later, this is the kind of scars that take forever for somebody to heal from. Emotional abuse, verbal abuse. That's the kind of abuse that has hidden scars people can't see. But that person, they last the longest. I have read things studying about abuse because I had abuse in my life. I have read where people who are abused physically have actually said, you know, the hardest thing for me to get over was the fact that my mom didn't stop my dad from abusing me, or that my mom, you know, didn't love me, or my mom said this one thing. For me, speaking of, I can give you an example. I had a lot of abuse growing up from my brother, not so much from my mother. My mother gave me a lot of, it was more emotional abuse. But my brother was very physically abusive. And the physical abuse has faded out. I don't really think about it anymore, but you know, there's one memory clear as a bell that I will never forget. One time me and my mom were having a verbal argument. My brother came into my room and beat me up, beat the hell out of me, and walked out of my room, and I heard her thank him. My mother thanked my brother for beating me up. And that is a memory I'm 51 years old, and I will probably have to my dying day. You know, as a new parent thinking about having children, that's the kind of stuff that you can imprint into your child. Are you going to imprint good memories for your child? Or are you going to imprint something like that for your child? I pity the poor child who's hauled away to some other country to be hammered into a little whatever version of what you want your child to be. I pity that child, because years from now, decades from now, that's what they're going to remember. Oh God, they're going to remember that. How mom and dad were so ashamed, were so disappointed that they actually wanted their child to be remade, hammered, molded into what they wanted, rather than because they weren't acceptable the way they were. Mom and dad didn't accept them as they were. Yeah, the damage that this kind of abuse causes long term can't even be described. It's the worst part of this whole thing. Parents, if you're thinking about having children and you're homophobic, or you have some really strong ideas of the lifestyle that your child needs to have in order for you to accept them, or you feel like they have to believe in God for you to accept them, do the kids that could be, that aren't yet, a favor, and don't have kids.
I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt.
Share the same weather, winter or summer, May or September, the 4th of whenever. It's better together. Let's get together. Home is where